to discuss Ireland's migrant integration strategy. It's something that's very close to my heart, and I do welcome the initiative, Minister. As we know, Ireland is an increasingly diverse country. The CSO data from 2016 shows that roughly 1 in 10 people living here define as non-Irish, while last year saw net inward migration to the state for the first time since 2009. A significant number of people are also seeking to build a life here in Ireland, to contribute to our communities and our wonderful country. Immigration is a positive and permanent reality in Ireland, and we must celebrate the diversity that comes with it. As the strategy recognises, integration is a two-way process. It's not about asking people to simply adapt to their new homes, but recognising that the state and wider society must make every effort to do the same. Real integration is proudly asserting that migrants should not be asked to blend in or to disappear into the crevices and margins of Irish society, but to become a fundamental and central part of it. Overall, how we treat migrants says a huge amount about who we are as a people. Since 2011, the citizen ceremonies held across the country are examples of Ireland at its best: inclusive, welcoming and open. They realise the reputation of Céad Míle Fáilte, looking beyond legal acceptance to a sense of social inclusion. In the past 4 years, over 85,000 people from more than 160 countries have become Irish citizens, widening and enriching our definition of what it means to be Irish. This is the spirit that we must proceed in. Around the world, we can see an alarming increase in xenophobia, as migrants are continually scapegoated, stereotyped and demonised. We see politicians across the Atlantic and the Irish Sea shamefully exploiting people's fears and whipping up anti-migrant sentiment. This trend is toxic, and Ireland must lead the fight against it. We must strongly reassert the positive contribution that migrants make to their new countries. I'm happy to see that 500,000 will be made available this year for local community integration projects. In particular, I think that music, culture and the arts are hugely beneficial in bringing communities together. Much has been said about how ordinary people in towns and villages like Ballahadreen have rallied to welcome Syrian refugees to their communities, and I can only further commend these efforts. They are a credit to our country. However, it's vital that the government does not simply rely on community and non-profit organisations to do this work. The state must ensure that adequate resources are provided for the provisions outlined in this strategy. Commitments to expand English language training programmes must be well funded. Similarly, intercultural awareness training for staff in the public sector is welcome, but we must ensure that the proper interpretation and translation supports are provided, especially in the context of healthcare and education. The citizenship ceremonies themselves are fantastic occasions, but they cost £1,125 to participate. This is clearly prohibitive for a huge number of people. The strategy commits to reviewing this fee, but no more, and I really do hope that the Minister will support its reduction. Beyond this, 2 stories from last month, to me, showcase the best and the worst of how things can work in Ireland when it comes to migration and integration. In April, a young man named Mohammed made his debut for Michael Davitt's GAA club in Belfast. Mohammed is a Syrian refugee who arrived in Ireland with his family from war-torn Aleppo. It's difficult to imagine the hardship. We can't even think about how difficult it is that he and his family have faced, the kind of terror that has caused so many to flee in recent years. He lined out for Davitt's under-10s last month, scoring 2 goals in his first game with his new teammates. Pictures of him standing proudly in an O'Neill's GAA jersey after the game quickly circulated. It was impossible not to be moved by the beaming smile across his face. It's brilliant that Ireland can give Mohammed and his family a new chance and a new life, but it should make us reflect on how much more we can do. Callous inaction and low commitments from European leaders are seeing people die on Europe's borders. We should not be congratulating ourselves for meeting tiny EU quotas for refugee resettlement, but asking why these figures are so low in the first place. We can and must do more to show compassion to people fleeing persecution and war. Just a few days after Mohammed played that game in Belfast, a mother living in a direct provision centre in Eglinton in Galway had to carry her sick child for 2 miles to hospital because she couldn't afford bus fare. The Galway Anti-Racism Network spoke to the Irish Times about the case and others like it, including a woman living in the centre who would have had to walk the 2 miles home with her newborn baby because of the €19 per week she's forced to live on can't cover transportation. Can you imagine the stress and anguish of that situation? Can we only imagine how difficult that must be? The migrant integration strategy does not account for these women, as it does not directly address how asylum seekers are treated by the state. It applies only to EEA and non-EEA nationals, including economic migrants, refugees and those with legal status to remain in Ireland. This is hugely disappointing. How can we credibly talk about the integration of migrants in this country without considering the thousands of people living in direct provision centres across the country? The design of this strategy means that direct provision falls outside law and policy again. Direct provision is a scandal. I have raised it in this House previously, but the treatment of people feeling some of the worst abuse in the world is shameful. Around 4,500 people are locked in this system. They are forced to live on €19 per week and cannot engage in education beyond the Leaving Cert. They lack basic cooking facilities and sleep in small, cramped communal rooms. The disastrous mental health effects are well known. Research from the Royal College of Surgeons has shown that depression and mental health problems are 5 times as high in direct provision as in the wider community, coupled with feelings of isolation and loss of self-esteem. People remain in this system, which has been repeatedly condemned by human rights organisations for up to a decade. It is absolutely shameful. Who benefits from such a system? Who benefits from being talented, ambitious, enthusiastic people from realising their potential? It is certainly not the state, which makes a mockery of its commitment to cherish all children of the nation equally. It is not the people living in carceral institutions, denied their basic rights and dignity. Ultimately, it is a network of contractors running these centres on a for-profit basis. Last year, 8 companies were paid €43.5 million to do so. Is this the best use of our resources? As we try to come to terms with the abuse inflicted on people in the mother and baby homes, Magdalen laundries and other state and religious institutions, we often look back and ask ourselves, how did this happen? Well, this is how it happens. It happens through endless discussions in committees, through reports left to gather dust, through the slow, cruel inaction of the state. It happens through a migrant integration strategy that says nothing about the 4,500 migrants trapped in a system that denies them their basic human rights. Similarly, the strategy also does not apply to the estimated 20,000 to 30,000 undocumented people living in Ireland today. This is unacceptable. We cannot, on the one hand, plead with the United States administration for justice for the undocumented Irish people living in America while ignoring the plight of the same people living here. Undocumented migrants' lack of legal status prevents them from accessing basic rights and protection, and a huge number of people live in a state of constant fear. And because of this, many are concentrated in non-unionised, low-paid sectors where exploitation is common and no reasonable means for redress exists. Economic integration is an essential for real integration for migrants. This cannot continue, Minister. I really do urge you to consider going forward. I urge the state to work closely with civil society organisations like the Migrant Rights Centre Ireland, the Irish Refugee Council and the Immigrant Council of Ireland. Thank you. I'm sorry for going over my time. Thank you.
Senator Hopkins.